And then look what Jesus says in verse 5. And Jesus was saying to them, the Son of Man, referring to himself, is what? Lord of the Sabbath. Look on the screen. The religious leaders say, why do you do not what is not lawful? Jesus said, have you not even read? And then Jesus says, oh, by the way, you know the one you're accusing that you're saying is breaking the Sabbath? I'm the Son of Man, and I am the Lord of the Sabbath. Remember back in Genesis 2, we saw that God blessed the Sabbath and set it apart as holy. Who did that? God did. What is Jesus saying about himself? He's the Lord of the Sabbath. He's making himself equal with God, right? Remember, God is the one who gave in the Ten Commandments the command about the Sabbath. What is Jesus saying about himself? He's the Lord of the Sabbath, and that means he's the only one who has the right to judge if the Sabbath is being broken or not. Remember when God gave the commands about, being in the grain field, you're not allowed to plow and thresh and make a profit and so forth. Jesus says, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. And what Jesus was saying is this: just as God did not condemn David and the priest for eating that bread so they wouldn't starve to death, David and his companions, in the same way, Jesus says, I and only I have the right to judge when it comes to the Sabbath, because I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. And what you Pharisees are saying that my disciples have done wrong, I am saying to you, I don't condemn them. And you can't either, because I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. Does that make sense? So again, the Pharisees had the audacity to blame the lawgiver. They said he broke the law? Jesus said, wait a second, haven't you even read? And oh, by the way, the one you're standing here and accusing, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. I'm God. Did Jesus ever declare his deity? Right there, right? In fact, let's look at Matthew and Mark's version real quick, and we'll come to a close here. Matthew 12. Let's see. Matthew gives us a little bit more information that Jesus had said in that grain field. Matthew 12, verses 1 through 8. We read, at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. And his disciples became hungry and began to pick the heads of grain and eat. But when the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, look, your disciples do what is not lawful on the Sabbath. Again, by blaming Jesus' disciples, they were also blaming Jesus, right? Because they were his disciples. Verse 3, Jesus said to them, have you not read? Have you not even read? I love that statement. Have you not read what David did when he became hungry, he and his companions? How he entered the house of God, and they ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those with him, but only for the priests alone. And look what Matthew's version adds that Jesus said. Verse 5, or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple break the Sabbath? Well, how do they do that? What are they doing on the Sabbath in the temple? They're serving. They're ministering, right? And yet, look what Jesus said. But they are innocent. Innocent in God's eyes. Because God and God alone has the right to judge what is lawful and unlawful on the Sabbath. And Jesus says, verse 7, quoting Hosea 6:6 in the Old Testament, what God said, I desire compassion, not sacrifice. If you had understood this, you would have not condemned the innocent. And again, Jesus says, for the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Go to Mark's version, chapter 2. We get a little bit more information there about some things Jesus said in the grain fields. Mark chapter 2, verses 23 through 28, we read, "And it happened that Jesus was passing through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples began to make their way along, picking the heads of grain. The Pharisees were saying to him, 'Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?' And Jesus said to them, 'Have you never read what David did when he was in need? And he and his companions became hungry? How he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar, who was the son of Elimelech. And David ate the consecrated bread, which is not lawful for anyone to eat except the priest. And he also gave it to those who were with him.'" And here we go. Mark's version adds this. Jesus said to them, "The Sabbath was made for man." In other words, the purpose of the Sabbath given by God, and here is Jesus, the Lord of the Sabbath, explaining that purpose, saying the Sabbath is for man, to rest in the Lord, to recover in the Lord, to rejoice in the Lord, to find refreshment in the Lord. The Sabbath was made for man. 6 days you work, but the seventh day in the Lord. The Sabbath was made for man, not the man for a Sabbath. You see, the religious leaders were putting all of these human, man-made religious traditions on the shoulders of the people, to the point that the Sabbath became so brutally oppressive. Nobody could rest in the Lord. Nobody could rejoice in the Lord. They were carrying this massive yoke of human traditions regarding the Sabbath. They could barely make it through the day. They were so confused with all these different do's and don'ts. Do we take a bath? Do we not take a bath? Do I toss it in this hand or toss it in that hand? Jesus said the Sabbath was made for man, not the man for Sabbath. And then he says in verse 28, "And so the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." So we see Jesus brilliantly rebuking the Pharisees who had the audacity to try to rebuke Jesus and his disciples. Have you not even read? Oh, by the way, the one standing in front of you, I'm the Lord of the Sabbath. I judge what is right and wrong in the Sabbath. Because I'm the one who is Lord over it. And I'm not condemning my disciples because they've done nothing wrong. And therefore, you cannot say a word against my disciples because they've done nothing wrong. And you're not the judges. I'm the judge. Does that make sense?